Hello, everyone. Welcome to It's a Progressive World. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Sam, and today we have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Professor Norman Finkelstein. Professor, thank you again for joining us. I'm just going to give a very short, brief introduction, but I mean, you really need no introduction. You're a leading social scientist of our times, I would say. You have a way of dissecting and analyzing scholarly work in such detail that I think you rarely see from anyone else. Professor Finkelstein also has a new book out that we'll be discussing today, along with hopefully a few other topics. His latest book is called I'll Burn That Bridge When I Get to It. Professor, thank you very much again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. You can forego the professor.
Really?
Comrade,
That might
comrade
be
is
hard.
just fine.
Okay, and folks, please like and subscribe. And this is gonna be hard. Okay, can I just go with Norman then?
Yeah, whatever you like.
Interesting.
We
If you're,
also quite surprising to find out that apparently you stumbled upon a few of our videos. Do you remember at all what the topic was about or
no, I
how much?
watched it. No, I watched more than just a few, and I couldn't distinguish one from the other because the format's
Fair enough.
basically the same. It's commentary on what's going on in the web and the internet world. So uh, there's not one that stands out.
Sam, we really need to watch out what we're saying because, although we barely get any viewers, maybe the few people that see it, we should be a bit more careful. But
Yeah,
okay.
probably. Yeah,
Okay, so
that's a good idea.
Norman, I thought we could just start by you perhaps introducing and giving a overview of the main thesis that you make in your book. I'll burn that bridge when I get to it.
I'm not sure if it's correct to say I have a main thesis. My purpose for writing the book was pretty straightforward. Um, I am active politically. I was active in the Bernie Sanders campaign, the two primary runs in 2016, 2020. It was a noticeable feature of both campaigns that the Bernie Sanders came into collision with cancel culture, and the cancel culture was weaponized by the Democratic Party in order to derail the Bernie locomotive, to stop the Bernie campaign dead in its tracks. And at some point, I decided to just sit down and read the foundational texts of this identity politics um, phenomenon to see if there's anything there. And so a lot of the book is given over to what you may call, or what might be called, forensic scholarship, just reading these texts and trying to make sense of it, applying common sense, uh, evidentiary rules, basic evidentiary rules, and see what's there. And I conclude there's nothing there. It's just completely empty, uh, vacuous gobbledygook. And then the question is, if it is completely empty, vacuous gobbledygook, then what accounts for its traction? What accounts for its cultural salience? And at that point, I then speculated, I think reasonably, that the main purposes of identity politics or wokeness are first to fill a void in the Democratic Party now that a large section of the white working class has exited it. Number two, the Democratic Party weaponized identity politics in order to derail a class-based politics. And number three, the identity politics put a kind of progressive sheen on the powers that be in the Democratic Party, so as to make it appear that this is a progressive agenda, even as it doesn't at all address basic questions like distribution of wealth in our society, distribution of power in our society. So, to put it simply, people get to call themselves progressive, even radical. They get to call themselves even radical, even as the fundamental problems confronting our society, a huge chasm that separates the haves from the have-nots, the fact that the middle ground between the haves and the have-nots, what used to be called the middle class, has basically hollowed out, and that the system at that level no longer functions in a way that gives the overwhelming majority of people any grounds or prospects for hope in life. So that, I think, sums up how it began and what it then concluded.
And do you think this is a very new phenomenon or has been going on for a while? Because it's kind of reminding me of the old left versus new left conversations, and I'm sure over the years, I mean, I kind of think of wokeism as being politically correct. I'm sure that has existed, but has it been maybe turbocharged over the past decades or so, and there are just new aspects that are added every day?
No, I think there are aspects of it that are old, as in everything old is new again. But there are aspects of it which are significantly different. The main difference is you take political correctness, okay, which I lived through. I remember it quite well. Political correctness was this kind of marginal phenomenon in our society, mostly academics trying to be avant-garde, the vanguard, and but it had no real impact in the real world. Remember, political correctness the term was coined by leftists themselves as a form of self-mockery at the silliness of some of the posturing and posing of people who call themselves on the left. This new phenomenon is very different in the sense that it now occupies center stage at the New York Times, center stage on MSNBC, center stage at the Democratic National Conventions 2016 and 2020, center stage in Biden's cabinet picks, in President Biden's Supreme Court choices, in President Biden's press secretary. It's the big difference is there's now huge, not marginal, huge institutional power behind this woke phenomenon, this weaponizing of identity politics. And it's seeped into all aspects of our culture, not in an organic way. In an organic way, culture changes, culture advances. Also, there are regressions along with the advances, and one has to, be cognizant of both phenomenon. You take anything like the web. Yes, a huge amount of new information is available, and that's a positive thing. Most people say the downside is a lot of the information is unreliable. That to me is not the downside. The downside is people have stopped to read books. Every free moment that they have is devoted to going to the social media, and the social media has no intellectual content. People confuse the idea that a tweet is an argument. No, a serious argument is very difficult to compose. It requires a huge investment of mental labor. A tweet is, it's like a belch. It's not an argument. Now, I acknowledge sometimes a tweet can be clever, a tweet can be witty, a tweet can be timely, but it's not an argument. An argument, as I said, it has a main clause, it has subclauses, it has evidence, it has logic. It's very difficult to construct a serious argument. So you can say that in any situation, there is an element of uh, progress and an element of regression. In the case of the identity politics, I would say it's become overwhelmingly regressive.
So you don't think that perhaps, even though in your book you go back to many decades to talk about different people and how they've been canceled, but you don't think you could have written this book, let's say 10, 15 years ago?
No, because uh, remember, I'm approaching this from the point of view of politics. There are other people who approach cancel culture from the point of view of its intellectual origins. So I listened the other day to a philosopher, Susan Neiman, I think is her name, and she was exploring the Foucaultian and the Carl Schmittian origins uh, of identity politics and wokeness. I'm not particularly interested in that because,
Oh,
well,
was that on Unheard? I
yes,
think I saw the same thing, yeah.
yeah, that didn't particularly interest me. First of all, because the originating thinkers, be it Foucault or Schmidt, don't particularly interest me. But secondly, because when you read the actual, so to speak, texts or foundational texts of identity politics, it's just a completely vacuous mishmash. I don't know if Foucault is there or Foucault is not there, or Schmidt is there or Schmidt is not there. It's just garbage. So I wasn't interested in the intellectual genesis of identity politics, wokeness. I was more interested in it as a political phenomenon and how it has or has been weaponized in order to derail the class politics when for the first time in probably 100 years, the Bernie Sanders campaign illustrated that there's real possibility for a class-based politics in the United States. It's still in its infant stages. I won't live to see its fruition. However, we're all links in the chain. And even in the great big communist tomorrow, I suspect there'll still be lots of problems that require a resolution. So I thought, that was worth exploring what's going on here. That people like in my generation, Angela Davis, I was in love with Angela Davis as a 16-year-old. It drove my mother mad, not because she was black and Jews don't like black people, but because I wouldn't shut up about her. Everything was Angela Davis, Angela Davis. And later in life, when I grew alienated from Angela Davis, whenever I had a new obsession, say it was Mao Zedong, my mother would say with a mixture of contempt and indignation, Angela Davis, reminding me of my previous obsession. Well, Angela Davis was, she was extremely smart, and she had a lot of raw physical courage. You can't get around that. She spent a lot of time in jail, and she was at that time, she was kind of frail. She always said she was a very shy personality. I kind of believe that. And she showed her conviction. She went to jail and served her time. And that was something. And also, she was just very smart, and I appreciate that fact. So she was at one point on the FBI 10 most wanted list. And now she's been transformed into the Martha's Vineyard, the cynosure of woke politics. She's now on the Martha's Vineyard 5 most coveted list. They all want to be with Angela Davis. And you have to ask yourself, what's going on here? How did that transformation occur? I'm on nobody's most coveted list, and I like to keep it that way. Certainly I don't want to be on any I don't want to be on any Martha's Vineyard most coveted list. And I would consider it, no, I'm being serious now, I would find it seriously troubling if I were. I would have to ask myself, no, wait, Norm, you're just getting a little bit too popular in precincts which should loathe you. What's going on? And you have to ask that question with Angela Davis. What's happened? Why is she on the cover of the New York Times Magazine? Why is she on the cover of every magazine now? Why is she being introduced in the University of South Carolina by the second richest person in South Carolina, who happens to be a woman? You could find it on the web. Just Google, just go to the web and search Angela Davis, University of South Carolina. And this blonde-haired Southern belle comes on. She's a multi-billionaire, and she's saying only half ironically, how much she and Angela have in common.
Oh, wow.
You know, if Bill Gates ever invited me somewhere and talking about how much we have in common, I really wonder. I would wonder what's going on.
Well, you're both men, you're both human.
Oh,
So, I mean,
yeah,
there are
exactly.
some.
And we're
Eyes,
both,
I think.
we're both Jewish. And guess what? That's where it ends. And I would say one thing we have in common is my last name is Finkelstein, and Bill Gates hung out with Epstein. So there's some intersection,
Connection there.
some connection.
Some
Or
unfortunate
Kimberly
connections.
Crenshaw would say there's some intersectionality there.
There's some intersection.
So this guy reminded me, before going back to the book, is that I was listening to another interview of yours, Sam. You just mentioned the name right before we went on. I forgot. And in there, you were talking about how in classes right now, in the beginning of lectures, or let's say smaller classes, people kind of go around and introduce their pronouns and stuff. And I was thinking about, in my case, actually, that was quite surprising, because I remember when I was doing my bachelor, early 2010, and whenever we had the smaller seminar tutorial classes where there would be things like this, where people would talk and interact more, I would more stay quiet, because I would find that in the first class, people would just say like some absurd stuff that would come to their mind because they haven't done the reading, and just something, whatever that was in the news that was big, that they would talk about, and just kind of crazy stuff. And then after the second class, they might not even come, and things would get much more normal. Would you say that do you think that the way that students act perhaps in classes have changed over the years, or there were always people like this and not?
There are many. You have to enter many caveats. As you know, in the book, I said, whenever asked, I say my pronouns are fuck/you, and I said it's only a matter of time before in seminars people are going to be saying my pronouns are he, him, and I have a big juicy 9-inch. It's become
Clock them.
There's a huge confusion going on in sectors of academia, about whether the class is a dating app or it's a place where you're supposed to have serious intellectual inquiry. And there too you have, as Kimberly Crenshaw would say, some intersection. Because it is becoming a dating app. Why do I want to know anyone's pronouns? I have no interest in your pronouns. Frankly, I don't. I have no interest whatsoever in your pronouns. In any event, as to its pervasiveness, it's captured some departments. Some departments are being held hostage to this lunacy: comparative lit, anthropology, probably French studies. There are some departments have been captured. And then it's more a graduate student phenomenon than an undergraduate student phenomenon. And thirdly, it's an elite phenomenon and not a working class phenomenon. I teach currently I'm teaching at Hunter College, City University of New York. It's a public college. And I've taught probably now about 300 students. Of those 300, only 2 of the 300 have expressed a concern about being properly addressed in regard to their pronouns. Otherwise, it's just,
That's
look,
actually
young people are very tolerant nowadays, wonderfully
Mhm.
tolerant and mutually respectful. It represents, in my opinion, a cultural advance. On the other hand, these concerns are obviously next to student debt, student tuition, health, both their own and their parents, because
employment.
most of them live at home. So parents and extended family. Next to those concerns, obviously, pronouns loom very low, which is why in the Bernie Sanders campaign, one thing that never came up were what were Bernie's pronouns.
Hmm.
You
I mean,
know,
that was a few years ago. I think it hadn't become a hot enough topic now. If he were to run again, he might
no,
have to.
I don't believe that. I don't believe
He
that.
might be he might be forced.
No,
But by the way, in that interview that I just mentioned, I also really appreciate how you talked about the effect on language and how ugly it's making it. Because just a couple of years ago, I was going to the University of Geneva here, bit, and that's in French. And just the way they were writing stuff were insane. They would write student, and then they would put a dot, and then there would be like the feminine version, and then they would put another dot, and there would be an X, and then another dot for like an S in order to incorporate all this in the French language. And it was just the most
Because
ridiculous thing I had seen.
these people
you
are the most literal sense of the word. They're illiterate. They have no feel for language. No, it's true. Of course, language changes, but language changes, as I said a moment ago, it changes organically. There's a kind of natural, there's a natural flow to it. But these apparatchiks, they're taking crowbars, they're taking hammers, they're taking axes, and they're trying to change language as if they're as if they're untutored carpenters hammering a nail into a wall. Again, carpentry is an art, so I said an untutored carpenter hammering a nail into the wall. That's not how language can evolve, because they have no feel for the melody of a language. They have no feel for the cadence of a language. They have no feel for even the look of the language. If you have a page which has all these slashes, it looks ugly. It looks ugly. And then if you're a
confusing.
writer, you're trying to figure out a way, how can I eliminate the slashes? How can I eliminate the him, her slash? Sometimes, because our language has evolved and you have to recognize the feminine or female. So you would normally use him, her, him slash her. So how do you kind of figure out a way to get rid of that slash but maintain the respect, owing to the fact that we want to recognize everybody, not just him, but also her. So, that's somebody who cares about language. These people don't care about language because they don't know anything about language. They've never read a novel. No, literally, they've never read a novel. They have no concept of language. It's just ugly. It's ugly. I know how, when you write something, very often I read a whole book out loud. I have to hear how it sounds,
No, of course.
how it sounds. But okay.
Would you say there's a innate? I find them to be somewhat like there's a conservativeness because they seem to believe there is a innate like thing inside each person that is okay. This is a like a black female, blah blah blah. And if we get to that, and it's kind of conservative, I think they're thinking in a way, not conservative, maybe more. It reminds me of the way basically like people who believed in innateness of like human. I don't know if that's a correct way of
I don't
putting
think these people, honestly, and I know the word "these people" can be seen in a very negative way, but I don't think these people have
it. We are
any
talking about very
any
specific group.
any knowledge about anything. I really don't. What is going on there is it's a race hustle. Each person wants to define him or herself differently, because then they have an irreducible identity and they can claim a new space at the table for them because they aren't represented. So if you are a Black, lesbian, trans, paraplegic, you now have a quadruple identity. It's not reducible to any other identity. And therefore, you then can make a claim to wanting representation for your group. And if you don't get the representation, you get to claim that the other side is acting privileged because they have a representation for them, but not for you. So mostly I just think it's a race hustle. I don't think it has any
It's a hustle.
intellectual content whatsoever. And I don't think much thought is given to it. And there are many examples. Why is it that if a male transitions to a female, that's a source of congratulation? You know, there are people who just drool over you. Whenever Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! Has a trans person on, she has this look like in a state of beatitude, you know. But
Jesus.
Admiring for no reason. I mean,
but if you're a white person who wants to transition to being Black, then you're a fraud and a fake. Why is one cause for celebration and the other an object of obloquy? There's no rhyme or reason to that. When I was growing up, the main argument in favor of gay rights, the main argument was, I was born this way. I can't change it. It's, I tried, I wanted to, but I couldn't. And that evoked a certain amount of sympathy, that it's not, quote unquote, this person's fault. And this person, if he or she had the choice, would prefer not to be a same-sex attracted. But nowadays, the argument has been completely reversed. Now it's said all of our sexualities are fluid, that you can be one thing one day, one thing the next day. Well, then, which is it? Which is it? Which is the politically correct view now? That it's innate or it's fluid? And people want both arguments depending on the venue, depending on what's politically most self-aggrandizing. There's no consistency. There's just nothing there.
Yeah, and by the way, would you describe the book? It's kind of like a polemic because you dedicate each chapter to basically a different person, and you go through their work really.
I don't consider that polemical. That's what's called taking a text seriously. Let's see if there's anything here.
I meant it in the best way. Yeah.
No, I'm not insulted, but I'm at all. I know you didn't mean it in a negative way, but I'm just saying that's not what I'm intending. I sat down with Kendi's so-called 2 books. They're not really.
His chapter is the best.
They're comics. They're comics. They're
superheroes
and they're supervillains. And all he does is like pin the tail on the donkey. He goes around saying racist, racist, not racist, anti-racist, racist, non-racist, anti-racist. That's not history. That's not history. It has nothing to do with history. And I devoted a full 100 pages because nobody had done it. Nobody has sat down because he's been showered with so many awards. He's everywhere. He's from CBS News. He's a consultant on race relations. Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! He's a consultant on race relations.
Oh, really?
Jesus.
Jack Dorsey, the former owner of Twitter, he gave Kendi $10 million to start up this quote-unquote anti-racist center at Boston University or Boston College. I think it's Boston University.
Yeah, Boston.
So he's ubiquitous, and he speaks with such authority. He has on his, his fashion horn-rimmed glasses, and of course he has his 10,000 dreads, which, make these woke people drool. And he's got that X. He's got that X. He took the crowbar and he inserted that X. So he's got everything. He's got the dreads, he's got the X, But
he's a superhero.
But nobody sat down and analyzed the books. I mean, many of them will speak, very broadly about what Kendi said, and then he can very broadly refute it. So I decided, okay, I'm going to sit down line by line. It can be very exhausting. It can be very tedious. But I decide line by line, I'm going to figure out, is there anything there? And you know what? There was nothing there. He's a
But
complete
It was
charlatan.
amazing. Before just moving on, it was amazing for me to find out that there's a very brief segment while which I should read, where he says, while superstar rapper Kanye West bags an honorary platinum as no one summoned up the raw feelings of anti-racist blacks better, West also loved this. This is what you point out. Kanye West also loved this guy Donald Trump and proclaimed that if a slavery endured for 400 years, it must have been the slave's choice. But hey, he's a superstar, so who cares?
Exactly.
So
He
it's
wants
unbelievable.
he wants to hang out. I mean, it's obvious what's going on. Doesn't take any great knowledge of rocket science. He wants to hang out with Kanye West. Why? What? You find
That's
that
his whole career objective.
you find that odd? The world is
No.
filled with lick
Yeah.
spittles.
No, definitely,
World is
especially a
filled
few
with-
years ago.
with groveling lick spittles, and you see them all with Barack Obama, surrounded,
Yes.
surrounded in a sea, an ocean, a universe of lick spittles.
But before getting to Obama, actually, I was not familiar. I should really maybe be more familiar with stuff with Ibram Kendi. And so after your book, I Googled him and I was surprised how many articles in major outlets were written about him just like over the past few days.
Positive.
Google News. Yeah, I mean, positive and all that put aside, I was just surprised by the sheer number of articles that were written about this guy. I was like, who is he, Michael Jackson or something? I mean, it was surprising.
It's about the equivalent.
Less talented.
He has the presence of Michael Jackson, and he has the brain of Whoopi Goldberg.
That's a
Oh,
good.
but seriously, surprising how many articles there were. And is there anything on his theory and how he conceptualizes
theory.
racism worth
There's
mentioning?
no theory. There's no theory. There's just barely a book. At least it has a binding, it has a spine.
How did you get through it? I must say, because that's the thing. It's I tried once, like reading a couple of people who I disagree with, and it's so difficult to go through. Like this nonsense. It's all like the bits you quote are.
You know,
a lot of drinking. I don't know.
No, but one of the things about doing this sort of thing is it looks very easy and it looks very simple, and people say, "Oh, we all know Kendi's a charlatan. Why you waste your time?" But in fact, it's not so easy. You know, to try to think through an argument. What is wrong here? What is he saying here that just doesn't make any sense? And you have to think it through very hard. You know, I have one chapter, and obviously you're not obliged to read the whole book, but there's one chapter on Robin DiAngelo. And it's kind of ruthless, that chapter. And many people find it hysterically funny. But I'll tell you, that chapter required a lot of work. I had to figure out, what is she saying here?
No, definitely.
What's wrong with this?
Which is very difficult.
Well, it's not that she's difficult. On the surface, there seems to be some truth to what she's saying, but at some level, you begin to discern there's some kind of complete lunacy going on here. This woman is a woman obsessed. Everything is about race. You know, she's, as I say in the book, she's like little Jackie Paper in the song Puff the Magic Dragon, which you probably don't know. Puff the Magic Dragon.
I've heard the expression.
So he's a magic dragon, and there's a little boy named Jackie Paper who plays with Puff. And I said, she's like little Jackie Paper trying to slay the racist dragon Puff. It's like everywhere, all she sees is race. It's a woman who's gone bonkers. She's gone lunatic. She's gone crazy. But then you want to understand, what's the appeal? Why is she being so widely promoted? Why did her book sell 11 million copies? Mm-hmm. What's going on there? And then I think it requires a certain amount of reflection, and you can judge for yourself whether I succeeded in giving a plausible explanation for this kind of cringy social phenomenon. If you know,
I think you gave it great.
there was this very old, there was this doll, this very ugly doll called a Cabbage Patch doll. You don't know it. I could see from your face. Just bring it up in your screen. Cabbage, C-A-B-B-A-G-E, Patch, P-A-T-C-H, Cabbage Patch doll. And it was a hideous looking doll.
Oh, yes.
And yet it was all the rage. Every girl had to get a Cabbage Patch doll.
My mom had one of these.
Yeah, everyone had it. Everyone. Every hut in Inner Mongolia had a Cabbage Patch doll. And you wonder, why did this doll gain such salience? And Robin DiAngelo is like a Cabbage Patch doll. You have to ask yourself the question, what is it that caused her to become a phenomenon? And I don't think the answer to questions like that is nearly as obvious as people presume.
No, but I mean, my easy answer that I tend to go to is that she's selling the perfect product to corporations, which is that she comes there, it looks like you're doing something for your staff and everyone, and it doesn't really cost you much because, yeah, you have to pay for her to show up, but that's nothing. At the same time, you're doing something very socially responsible.
I think that's true. But I do believe there was something else going on. You can decide for yourself whether it's deeper or not deeper. What was going on is she was transmitting the message to every Black person within her hearing that never trust white people. They all think you're racist. Excuse me. They all think you're, she says, all Black people think, all white people think that all Black people are gorillas. That's what she says. So, no, she does say that.
Wow.
So if you're marching in a demonstration and you're Black and you see a lot of white people turn out, as was the case during the George Floyd demonstrations, the message she was transmitting was to Black people, don't trust them. They think you're all apes. Don't trust them. And so she served a very useful purpose. She sowed division. She sowed distrust just at the moment that a class-based politics was emerging that was interracial and multinational. So that to me is what accounted for her promotion. She divided the working class.
Would you prescribe that much influence to her?
I would not. It's not so much influence to her. It's trying to understand the broad phenomenon. And there is a broad phenomenon now of how entrenched, deep-seated, ineradicable is racism. That's a common theme of.
That's what Prince Harry is saying about the UK.
Ta-Nehisi Coates. It's become, as Cornel West said, this idea of racism, and he was speaking specifically to Ta-Nehisi Coates. He says it's become reified, that it's got this power of its own, and that it cannot be extirpated, or for that matter, it cannot be diminished. Its forms may change. It may be more benign among liberals. It may be more malignant among conservative Trump-supporting whites, but it's there. It can't be eradicated. It can't be extirpated. And Black people don't trust them. And the reverse message is to white people. The message to white people is, you got all the power. You're white. There's no difference between a white Amazon worker and Jeff Bezos, because you're white. And if you're white, you got all the power. So why give up a good thing by aligning yourself with Blacks? That's just going to diminish your hold over power. And I found it striking in the last special, Netflix special of Chris Rock. Did either of you see it?
Seen clips.
Okay.
I still not.
You probably did. It was awful. It showed a real moral deterioration in Chris Rock. He was a very sharp, very acute social observer. And now it was just all this kind of really juvenile, unfunny, unclever sex. Very, sex can be funny. Obviously, Eddie Murphy was very funny. But this was just very juvenile. It was gross, vulgar, unfunny, unclever. And that was the price of power. Once Chris Rock got catapulted into the precincts of power, and it essentially happened in 2016 when there was a strike by Black actors and actresses to protest the fact that the Oscars, there were no Oscar nominees for Black people that year. And Chris Rock was recruited, conscripted to be the MC that year. So you knew he made it. He crossed the picket line. He did. They asked him not to go, but he couldn't resist the fame and the fortune. He went, and at that point, his career crashed because once in those precincts of power, you can't be a clever social observer anymore because your plug might be pulled. In any case, it was very striking. At one point in his routine, he was talking about January 6th, and he said, the protesters wanted to bring down the government. They wanted to bring down the government. He says, why do they want to bring it down? It's their government. They're white. It's their government. And that to me was very striking because that was just a version of what Robin DiAngelo says. You're white. Even if you're a worker, you're white. So that government in Washington is yours. It's yours. A complete obfuscation of the class issues. They didn't think that government was white, was theirs, even as it was white. They didn't think that, but he was consciously or unconsciously promoting the ideology that what counts is not your class status, not your socioeconomic status. What counts is your identity. So why would whites want to bring down their government?
And
I don't know if you heard, but the Dilbert comic artist who's a supporter of Trump, you're completely right. It's becoming internalized in majority white people. I think you can see evidence.
Well, it's being promoted. Look, there are two tendencies. There is the so-called identity politics left. In my opinion, it's not a left at all. And then there's what was represented by the Bernie Sanders, the class-based politics. And those two politics have in recent times been in contention, have been in a collision course. And in my opinion, one is real, one is counterfeit, one is a left, one is just a weaponization of what appears to be left politics, but it's actually in the service of the powers that be. One requires sacrifice, and one gets to posture impose and either sacrifice nothing or get quite a lot of money from. No, it's no joke. The other day I was at Hunter College where I teach, and I saw a young man. He was recruiting people for union work. And I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a Teamster. I'm a Teamster. I drive a truck. And I said, so what's your background? He said, I went to NYU. No, NYU is a good school. It's now a good school. It wasn't always, but it's now a good school. And I have to tell you, I told him, I deeply respect you. I deeply respect you to give up a very promising career with an NYU degree and trying to organize the working class in Amazon right now, the Amazon organizing effort. So it takes that kind of politics. It takes real sacrifice. But does it take any sacrifice to drool over trans people? To post your pronouns on the website? To host Ibram X. Kendi? Is that radical? It requires no sacrifice whatsoever. It's just completely posing and posturing, devoid of any serious content. I grew up, the heroes of my generation, the heroes for me, were people who made huge personal sacrifice, even as they never even conceived it as sacrifice for the cause. If you go back to the early 20th century, I was rereading, things from my youth. I was reading Leon Trotsky's book, The Young Lenin. Okay? So young Lenin, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, I assume you know who he is. Do you guys know who he is?
Yes.
I believe so.
Yes.
Okay. So Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, he was of noble descent. His father had earned the nobility title. He was the top student in his high school, won the gold medal. He then was in exile for his political activities. He needed to get some work, so he wanted to go to law school. But the officials who exiled him wouldn't let him attend law school. So he sat down for a year and a half. The normal course of study was 4 years. He sat down for a year and a half to study for the law exam. They wouldn't let him attend law school. He then took the exam. There were 12 subjects. If you got an distinction in half the subjects, you get to graduate with distinction. He got distinction in all 12 subjects. Rosa Luxemburg, I don't know if you know her, the great German socialist
Marxist
leader. Rosa, she would have got the gold medal in high school, but she was too rowdy, so they wouldn't give it to her. She was one of the first women in the world to get her PhD in economics at Geneva, incidentally, for you who are studying at Geneva. If you go to your school and ask them about Rosa Luxemburg, you'll see they'll tell you. She was an extremely formidable intellect, really kind of bedazzling, like Lenin. And she spent a lot of time in jail. You read her letters, never a complaint, never a word of complaint, never any self-pity. She once said, when I die, I want to die at my post, in jail, or in a street fight. Well, this formidable woman, not formidable physically, she had a physical handicap. She was not formidable physically. She left jail in around 1919. She was physically very, very frail at that point. She went right out to the revolution. She knew where she was being hunted down. She refused any protection. She said, I go where I tell other people to go. And her head was battered. Her body was, she was tortured. Her body was thrown in the ocean. It was washed up a few months later. I'm sorry you don't know her. It's truly your loss, and I mean that very seriously. These are the people we admired. People who made sacrifices for the cause. Not people who post their pronouns. No, I'm dead serious about that. I see on the web Judith Butler, a big announcement in 2020. Judith Butler announced that her new pronouns are they, them.
Really? Oh, fuck.
You know,
Is that the
that's-
New York
it-
Times journalist? Is that who she?
just,
No,
you're
she's a
invited to
philosopher.
Google.
She's a very
Oh.
famous.
Go to
Very-
Google, just Google her name. Judith Butler, announcement pronouns, they/them.
Why was an announcement needed for this? I mean,
Yeah,
that's...
announcement.
That's how you get clicks.
Yeah. You know,
Oh, yeah.
this is radical politics. This is sacrifice. This is just, it's disgusting. It makes me want to retch. My great hero of my youth, Paul Robeson, who you also don't know, I can see from the look in your faces. He was the most.
I know him from your book.
He was the most famous person, the most famous American in the world, in the whole world, except for Franklin Delano Roosevelt in his era. He was a great artist, he was a great athlete, he was a great linguist, and he then devoted himself to the cause of the emancipation of his people, Black people, he was Black, and also to the international working class. His income, because he would not retreat from his beliefs, he famously said, "I will not retreat 1,000th part of 1 inch." His income, it went in 1 year from $200,000 a year to $6,000 a year. He was locked out of every concert hall. He was locked out of any venue where he could earn an income. Eventually, he was emotionally shattered and ended up living in seclusion. You know, W.E.B. Du Bois, the greatest Black scholar and one of the greatest scholars, period, in the 20th century, he ended up at age 80 with handcuffs, and he was tried for being too loyal to the Soviet Union, ended up in exile in Ghana, self-imposed exile in Ghana. That's what it meant to be a radical. That's what it meant to be fighting for a more just world. And Judith Butler thinks wearing leather and broadcasting her new pronouns makes her a radical or a revolutionary. This is just pure crap.
That's kind of this perfect for what I want to ask you now. Do you think this has a staying power, or is it going to be sort of a brief, like McCarthyism or something? You know, like a 10-year, 20-year period where people go crazy.
There is a backlash setting in. You can see that now. And those who are complete opportunists, like Whoopi Goldberg, she's like a bellwether of wokeness. No, she is.
That's a good point.
She's a complete imbecile. She's incapable of a coherent thought, but she's not
She believes Nazis had nothing to do. Nazism had nothing to do with racism. Do you disagree? It's a very famous fact.
Listen. Every utterance from her mouth is imbecilic because she's always trying to. She's a lickspittle of power because she's completely talentless. She's hideously ugly and stupid and talentless. So how else do you get a position of prominence like hosting the Oscars as she did for many years, unless she's a lickspittle? So when Roman Polanski, the filmmaker, okay, Roman Polanski, do you know who he is?
I know, but Camera, I don't think knows the story behind. He's very famous, good director, and also potentially a pedophile. I don't know how to. Yeah.
Well, he clearly raped one woman. She was 14 years old.
Yeah.
He made her, I think she took Quaaludes, I don't remember, and then he anally penetrated her. So when Whoopi was asked about that, she said, quote, "You can look, I can't make these things up. You just Google right now, Whoopi Goldberg, rape. She said, that's not rape.
Well, no, I mean, with Whoopi Goldberg, nothing surprises me.
Jesus Christ.
In Hollywood. She said, go look it up. Just put in Whoopi Goldberg, rape.
I can see right here.
Yeah.
No,
So
I
Maybe you
she's
mean,
can
an,
yeah.
play the edit
she's
the
an,
clip in, I
she's
suppose.
an imbecile from way back. From way
I
back.
had no idea about
Actually,
this. This is
I
crazy.
think from the moment of conception. By the way, I worked with her mother for a long time. I worked with her mother. Mother was wonderful, really modest, nice, dignified woman. I don't know what happened with Whoopi Goldberg. Must have been the Jewish half. No, just a joke. um,
What line of work was her mother in?
I worked with kids for a long time,
Nice.
and her mother worked with kids also. Her name was Emma. I assume she's passed already because she was significantly older than me when I was working there, but she was an extremely nice woman and dignified. I liked her. I have a very vivid picture in my mind's eye because Whoopi was already famous around the 1970s.
Hmm.
And back then we didn't have the
Yeah.
web, so there would be these washed on the city walls, kind of like, I don't know what you'd call them. You know, when you whitewash a sign on the wall, you must still do that in places like Iran. So, to
Yeah.
broadcast a Broadway show, so it was all over the city. And I used to ask her mother, so what do you think? Your daughter is so famous. And she said, yeah, it didn't go to her head. It didn't go to her head. She was nice.
Different than Whoopi
Give her
Goldberg
bedtime.
because I
Yes.
mean Whoopi kind of seems like, I mean, my thinking is that she must be surrounded by so many yes men that she has this kind of confidence to just say the most absurd stuff and then get kicked off her show but want to come back and still defend herself. I mean, saying that kind of nonsense with that much confidence is not easy.
Confidence. Yeah, I guess, there must be an element of confidence there.
There's a virtue.
She's actually, in my opinion, the real
But
precursor of Barack Obama.
Oh,
And I mean
speaking of
that
Barack Obama, how does
because
wait,
she's this super hip person with the granny glasses and the dreadlocks, and she's so hip, but she's also so hip, so uh, dependable, reliable. She'll never make any waves, at least consciously she won't, because she knows, as they say, on which side of the bread which side of the bread is being buttered. She knows exactly what to say and what not to say. Like Obama, hip, cool Obama. He's listening to Aretha Franklin sing "Natural Woman," and he's, with a syncopated head. Everything is completely fake. There isn't an authentic bone in his body, except when it comes to basketball. He genuinely loves basketball, no question about that. And he's apparently pretty good on the court. But once he's off the court, there's nothing. It's just all a fake.
he's okay at
what did you
giving
mean by
speeches, I would say. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Whoopi being a sorry, but what did you mean by Whoopi being a belvedere? Do you mean like we can like
Oh,
do you
yeah,
think she shows the signal
yeah,
of what's coming?
you could see which way the woke culture is going. Oh, I didn't finish my thought. Excuse me, I'm being scattered now, a bit scatterbrained here.
Same.
Whoopi recently denounced woke culture.
Oh, really?
Did
She
she?
said, they're
What?
rewriting the James Bond books to make them not sexist. Making James Bond not sexist is like
Good
making
luck.
Hitler a Philo-Semite. It's just stupid. Okay, so rewriting Mein Kampf so it reads like the Little Prince. So
Oh my God.
when she said, no, this is ridiculous because you're whitewashing our history and people should know what the real history is. So you saw Whoopi realizes which way the
Wow.
wind is going.
That's good news for
Yeah, I didn't think
oh
she'd be
yeah,
that clever.
no, that doesn't take too much cleverness. That's just a good opportunist. Put the finger in
Fair
the
enough.
from the
air and which
environment.
way is the wind going? And she knew it's got the woke politics has gone a little bit bonkerinos. So we're going to have to pull back.
Hopefully a bit. Hopefully. Sorry, Camille, I cut you.
No, nothing. I was just gonna ask, so I mean you dedicated a pretty big chapter to Obama. So how does he come into this picture? What would you say he represents?
Well, Obama represented the epitome of that the politics people just voted for him because of his race. There was no content whatsoever. Obama, what he did was, or I don't think he did it. His campaign managers, guys named David Axelrod and David Plouffe, what they did was they turned Obama's candidacy into a morality tale, and basically, instead of the presidential campaign being a referendum on the candidates, which is normally what a campaign is, you choose, quote unquote, the best candidate, you evaluate each of them and decide who's deserving of your vote. What they did is they reversed the whole election, and the election became a referendum on you, the voter. Are you a good person? As they would say in The Wizard of Oz, the good witch and the bad witch. Are you a good witch? Namely, you are woke, you are enlightened, you don't see race. You're not racist, and therefore you vote for Obama, because how could you not like Obama? He has a winning smile. He's obviously harmless. He's not going to spook you at night or in an elevator or in a dark alley. He doesn't even go to dark alleys because he went to Harvard, Harvard Law School. So if you didn't vote for Obama, it was not because Obama was somehow lacking. It was you who were lacking. It was your failure. It was because of that ineradicable racism in you. And so he turned the whole election into a referendum, a morality tale. And the referendum was not on him, but it was on the American people.
It's a very interesting way of thinking about it. I had never thought about his, I guess, campaign and what kind of impression it would have on people and how he would flip it around.
It also came, it came in a particular moment when the United States, the economy had crashed in 2008. The Iraq War turned into a disaster. So people were looking for a fresh start. And Obama's slogan was, of course, hope and change. And by the way, Trump's slogan was basically the same as Obama's. There's no substantive difference between hope and change, which was Obama's slogan, and make America great again, which was Trump's.
Hoping for change. It's hoping for a good change.
Exactly. So Obama's was a forward-looking hope. Trump's was a backward-looking hope. But each of them, make America great again. It's a backward-looking hope. But both of them were making the promise that there would be a qualitative change in the current situation of the vast amount of people in our country who were hurting under the current system. That's why Hillary lost. Hillary ran in a campaign of, quote, building on Obama. She was going to build on Obama. But unfortunately, for a large number of American people, building on Obama was building on quicksand, because their situation was deteriorating. Why would you want to build on quicksand? Whereas Trump, okay, he was a roll of the dice. He was kind of freaky, uncouth, but he held out the prospect that things would be better. They would be the way it was for your parents. Your parents had jobs. They worked in factories, true, but they were decently compensated. You had a home, you had a picket fence, your parents had pensions. All of that is gone. So both of them were running on hope and change platforms. Well, the difference was one was returning to a not mythical, a real past, which was better. It was for most Americans now, they're entering a world in which their future is much worse than that of their parents. So they both made the same promise. Of course, Obama's was completely fake. Obama had not a clue what he was doing. This is not an aspersion on Obama. It's just a factual matter. If you take the typical American president, take someone like Bill Clinton, who was an extremely smart guy. Clinton starts out in politics around age 21. believe it or not, he's already involved in politics in the early 1970s when he was shuttling between law school and working on the what's called the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He went back to 1972. So, and then he was governor of Arkansas, and he had made huge numbers of connections. He had a very nimble mind. So by the time he enters into the White House, he has a very clear vision of what he wants to do. I'm not happy with what he wanted to do, but you certainly couldn't fault Clinton for a lack of competence and know-how and so forth. Obama, he spent a few years in Chicago playing gym rummy and poker in the State House. It was just this very, this is Chicago, the most crooked place on God's earth, or Illinois, the most crooked place on God's earth. And he hung out with these state representatives, played cards with them. He was in the Senate for 1 year, and then he became president. He didn't have a clue what he was doing. He figured all I have to do is put a pretty face and make some speeches, and I'll just round up. I'm being very literal here. I'll just round up Harvard professors like Larry Summers, because they're geniuses, because they're Harvard and they're Jewish, and he really believed Jews were scary. He did. Just hang out.
Wow.
Enlist all these Harvard professors to be my advisors, and all I have to do is give a speech, because everybody, swoons at his speeches.
Yep.
Of course, he didn't write any of his speeches. The speeches were absolutely horrible. They're like fruity bubble gum. His delivery, well, each to his or her own. His delivery consisted of 4 things. 1, lift your head in the air like you're on Mount Rushmore. 2, pan the audience. 3, purse your lips like you're, important. And 4, pause every 30 seconds.
Pause.
It's long
Yes, pause.
So, your words are so rich and profound, it's going to take time for them to sink in. So you have to pause. It was those, 4 techniques, you might call them. He was not a great speaker. He wasn't even a good speaker, because nothing came from within. You can't have a great speaker. When you heard someone like Martin Luther King, who was a great speaker, you knew it was something inside him that was welling up. It was welling up from inside him. Obama, he's just reading what his idiotic entourage, his eight speechwriters gave him to read. There was nothing organic to it. There's no
No, certainly. And I mean, you can't prescribe much beside the delivery to him. And, I think he's just also been followed, and he was preceded by some politicians who were just, just the worst at everything, that he looks good.
Of coming after Bush and coming before Trump.
Yeah.
George Bush was
and
a great
Biden
orator.
What?
George Bush was a great orator. I think you're selling him short here.
Well,
Okay.
It's unlikely that was his real speaking pattern, because he went to Yale. He grew up in Connecticut. He was all blue blood, so one suspects that wasn't what you saw the real Bush.
He was putting on.
He was trying to be folksy. He was trying to be like a frat boy. But now, if you look at his current,
he couldn't do it.
If you look at his current persona as an artist, he affects a very different persona. Now, it's true that presidency was very sobering for him, because he will go down history as the worst president in American history, and that couldn't have been good for him psychologically, especially given what his parents must have thought by the end. A huge embarrassment, shame to the family. Not that the family was any great shakes, but a huge embarrassment.
Even within their own standards.
What?
Even based on their own standards, he was.
Yeah. Even by their own.
Pretty
he
bad.
ruined his brother's chances too of becoming president.
Yes, and the family wanted Jeb, not George. to be the
Yeah,
stand
exactly.
for the baton to be passed to him. So yeah, so there was all, that chapter of my book. It's not about Obama's record,
Mm-hmm.
because
No,
the
no.
record has been gone over 1,000 times, and I didn't feel I had anything new to add to it. What it was trying to look at Obama as this product of woke politics. How was this cult of Obama? How was it created? And there, I thought there were interesting things to say about how this whole thing was constructed by the powers that be. This complete, as his most serious biographer, David Garrow, he ends his 1,500-page biography, which has 300 double-column pages of endnotes. It's an extraordinary undertaking. And he ends it by saying, the vessel is empty.
Mm.
There's nothing there.
Wow.
Yeah, there's nothing there. He's an empty shell, an empty suit, as we say in American English.
And so, Norman, what are some other things and topics or issues that you're currently thinking of and working on? And perhaps also, what are some of your latest thoughts on Israel, Palestine, anything you have on your mind you
So
would like to
just
discuss? Or, yeah, go ahead, Sam.
just before we moving on to other topics, I want to say to everybody, try to get the book. Besides the fact that it's a fantastic, like, political scientific book, it's really funny. I thought it was really good. Like, I mean, it's good read. It's a good read, even if you're not interested in these topics. It's good read.
Definitely.
What chapter did you read?
Ibrahim Kendi, I really liked, and I really like Robin DiAngelo, especially the parts which you quote her. Is that a poem she wrote? When I spy a full moon, I can't help but see. This was unbelievable. It was I couldn't believe it.
That was all me. That was all me. But I changed the color scheme. If you look,
I see.
if you look
In
at the
homage to DiAngelo, I'm just reading. Should I read it? It's great, actually.
It's just 4 lines.
Yeah, well, when I spy a full moon, I can't help but see the white orb silencing, erasing, invalidating the black heavens. Racism, how do I loathe thee? Let me count the ways. And perfect summary of her, I think, mindset. Just perfect summary of her mindset.
I have to say, you asked me how can I read this stuff and write about. You get a good laugh because it's so ridiculous. These people.
Oh my God.
And I would definitely recommend that people get the paperback version if they can, because we got the Kindle version. I don't know, on Kindle's a bit disorientating. Like, you don't really understand where you are in the book and what is going on. It's kind of odd.
There's no page
experience.
number.
Yeah, it's not. PDFs are better. It's my first time reading on Kindle.
Did you get the paperback version?
No, we got the Kindle version.
It's an absolutely beautiful version. Physically, it's just really nice. I handled all the technical.
I like the cover.
And you like the cover?
Yeah, I really like the picture. It's very badly. Yeah, it's very nice.
Oh,
but you like handled the logistics of this, or?
Yes, because I had a small publisher, and there's only so far you can go.
Mm-hmm.
Big publishers, there's this huge division of labor, so each department has their responsibility, but when you have a small publisher, a lot more depends on you. I decided to invest in the book because I knew it would be my last book, and I figured,
really?
Yeah, I can't do it anymore.
How much time and work did this book take you?
Well, it's 2 parts. There is the actual writing of the book, and then there is the production side.
Yeah.
And the production side can drive you just mad because I doubt you guys know anything about publishing, but when you write a book, it goes through what's used to be called, now it's changed a little, it used to be called first proofs, second proofs, third proofs, final proofs. And at each stage, new errors creep in.
Mhm.
New errors creep in, and then the typesetting, the this and the that. And so you have to keep rereading it and rereading it and rereading it and rereading it until, it creeps into your dreams and creeps into your nightmares. It's just a horrible, 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 horrible process. So I'm putting an end to it. Now I'm just trying to figure out which books to stock in my coffin, and whether and which of my dictionaries should I take with me. I have this
Right.
dictionary, but I think that would take up too much space.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So, I have to figure out which dictionary to take along, because I do
You
like.
should write a memoir, though. In memoirs, there's no referencing, no footnote,
No.
stream of consciousness.
My life. There was a movie called My Life as a Dog. My life as a communist just wasn't very interesting.
Well,
We disagree. Okay. But yeah,
certainly.
sorry, I distracted from other
Oh.
issues.
So I think we'll end it at that. And it was very nice to talk to you guys. Next time, I want you to decide whether it's going to be the tie or the button collar. But
As long as there's a next time,
for
no
sure, for
problem.
is
Yeah, we
I'll
would
make
love
sure.
to talk to you about Israel and Palestine at some point.
this Iranian Frank Sinatra look. I just can't go for it.
Exactly, Iranian Frank. That was you figured it out.
I'm waiting for you to break out in my way. I'll do it my way. That's all.
Yeah, I know. I love the song. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm going for. They had the best style in the
I know that. Well, let me give you some advice. Stop going there.
Okay. All
right. What do you do professionally?
I'm English teacher, sometimes a consultant.
What level?
Business consultant, like benchmark. Oh, a teacher, English teacher to adults, like
so you don't read books. It's just like ESL.
Yes. I mean, I try to include as much as I can, but
And what is on this Geneva guy? What are you studying?
No, well, with the studying, I'm not doing it anymore because I was just trying to look into doing a second master's and all that, but I kind of lost interest relatively quickly there. But I do writing and editing and proofing mainly, but really web news, kind of like website articles, so around 500 to 800 pages, not necessarily books and things like that. I had one experience actually at that university with a book, and I mean, I saw all the other aspects that are added to books, so I completely understand what you're talking about. I mean, the way you had to even format a book in order for the printing to be able to work was just a story on its own.
It's a nightmare, that production. Nice. Make sure to, when you get in Geneva, are you still at the University of Geneva? Or
no, not anymore, but I live in Geneva.
Well, you should find out about Rosa.
Yes, no, certainly.
Really spectacular.
It's very famous. She's very famous.
Well, you know me, Sam, I don't know much, so it shouldn't surprise you at least.
Well, you're young and you're forgiven because that whole history has been forgotten. And one of the pleasures of writing the book was I had an opportunity to restore the memory of people who deeply inspired me growing up. So I have one of my favorite pages in the book. I'm not sure where it is now, but it's a picture of 5 people who had a big impact on my life, beginning with Paul Robeson, Rosa Luxemburg, Pete Seeger, the singer, just to give them the recognition that I felt they deserved for the part that they played in who I was and who deeply inspired generations of people. So that was, and I also had a page with 2 very dear friends, namely Noam and Carol Chomsky. I have a picture with them. And then I was also I felt if I included Noam and Carol, then I had to include my parents.
Mhm.
So I have a page with my parents. So in answer to what you said earlier, I did write a memoir. This is it.
Really.
This is my life. Okay,
Well,
guys.
thank you, Norman. It was an absolute pleasure, and hopefully we didn't bother you too much, and hopefully we'll get to do
You
it
didn't
again
bother me.
sometime.
And never say things like that. I hate it when people put themselves down. There's so
Well
many
noted.
people, there's so many people out there who are already at the ready to put you down. Why help them out? Why make it easier for them? You
Certainly is true.
you have a role to play in life. You have a purpose in life. You justify your consumption of natural resources, which are scarce, and you don't make any apologies and never humble yourself before anyone else. The only grounds for humbling yourself if you're a sick sack of shit. And unfortunately, those people never humble themselves. But I always feel obliged to remind people, you have a purpose, you have a meaning, you're not hurting anybody. Don't apologize for anything.
Well, thank you very much, Norman. That is very,
Thank you,
very
sir.
kind of you. And thank you to everybody for watching. Please like and subscribe. If you have any comments, questions, criticisms, leave them below and we'll get to them instead of Professor Norman.
Oh,
Thank you.
best of luck to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.